In March of 1900, a British governor stood inside the royal palace of Kumasi and made a demand that no one in the room expected him to survive making. He wanted a stool, not a throne. A wooden stool plated in gold that no king, no queen, no human being had ever been allowed to sit on. He wanted to sit on it himself. What happened next became the last full-scale war an African kingdom ever waged against the British Empire. It wasn't led by a king. It was led by a 60-year-old queen mother named Yaa Asantewaa, who stood up in a room full of silent men and asked them a question that still echoes through Ghanaian history. If the men of Asante would not fight, would the women have to do it for them? Welcome back to Labari Studios, where we tell you about the African men and women whose power was so threatening that the world had to erase them. If you're interested in learning about African history and the untold stories that the West tried to erase, give this video a like and subscribe as we go on a journey into the past. First, let's explain what the Golden Stool actually was. Most retellings call it a throne. It wasn't. According to Ashanti tradition, the Golden Stool descended from the sky in the late 1600s, called down by the priest Okomfo Anokie during the reign of the first Asante Ose Tutu. It didn't hold a king's body. It held the sunsum, the soul of the entire Ashanti nation. No person, not even the king, was ever permitted to sit on it. It was set on its own throne, never touched the ground, and was brought out only for the most sacred ceremonies. So when the British governor, Sir Frederick Hodgson, announced he intended to sit on it, he wasn't asking for a piece of furniture. In Ashanti terms, he was demanding the soul of an entire nation as a war trophy. This wasn't a random insult. By 1900, Britain had already broken the Ashanti Empire twice. British forces had fought and defeated Ashanti armies in earlier wars, annexed Ashanti territory, and in 1896 exiled the Asante King Prempeh I, along with much of the royal family, to the Seychelles Islands, thousands of miles away in the Indian Ocean. The kingdom was leaderless. Hodgson assumed it was also powerless. He didn't account for Yaa Asantewaa. She was the Ejisuhemaa, the queen mother of Ejisu, one of the states within the Ashanti Confederacy. And here's what most people don't understand about that title. Queen mothers in Ashanti political structure weren't ceremonial figures standing quietly beside a throne. They held real institutional power. The right to nominate a chief, the right to remove one, a formal seat in council, deep authority over succession and land. In some accounts, a personal fortune and personal following independent of any king. This wasn't a workaround. It wasn't a woman finding a side door into power because the front door was closed to her. It was the system working exactly as designed. Ashanti governance had built female authority into its foundation centuries before Yaa Asantewaa ever stood up in that council meeting. She had already watched her own grandson, a chief, get deported alongside Prempeh. She had watched her nation get carved apart, piece by piece, treaty by treaty, exile by exile. And when Hodgson made his demand for the stool, the remaining chiefs of the Ashanti Confederacy gathered in secret at Kumasi to decide what to do. The room was divided. Some chiefs wanted to resist. Others, having already seen British firepower firsthand at Amoafo and elsewhere in earlier wars, argued for accommodation. Fear was reasonable. Britain had already proven it could burn a capital and exile a king. According to Ashanti oral tradition, it was Yaa Asantewaa who broke the deadlock. She told the assembled men plainly that if they were too afraid to pick up their guns, the women would strap on their own weapons and fight in their place. It's one line, repeated for over a century, and it still lands with the same force. A challenge to an entire room of frightened men, delivered by a grandmother who had already buried enough of her family to European exile to know exactly what silence would cost. The chiefs voted for war, and they made Yaa Asantewaa commander-in-chief of the Ashanti army, the only woman in Ashanti history ever to hold that position. Think about what that actually means. Not a symbolic title, not an honorary appointment to make a political point after the fact. Actual command of an actual army at war against the British Empire, handed to a 60-year-old woman because the men in that room believed in that moment that she was the right person for the job. Let's talk about what that command looked like in practice, because this is the part that gets flattened the most in the retelling. For 6 months, starting in March 1900, Ashanti forces under her direction laid siege to the British fort at Kumasi. This wasn't a symbolic gesture. Thousands of Ashanti fighters surrounded the fort, cutting off British supply lines and communications for weeks at a time. Governor Hodgson and his garrison were trapped inside, running low on food and ammunition, while Yaa Asantewaa coordinated the siege from the field, organizing fighters, managing supply, holding a coalition of Ashanti forces together under sustained pressure. The British eventually staged a desperate breakout to escape the fort entirely, abandoning Kumasi to Ashanti forces, while colonial command scrambled to bring reinforcements up from the coast. A colonial governor, representing the largest empire in the world at that moment, had to run. Here's the thing about this war. The historical record is clear. British military reports documented the siege in detail. Colonial correspondence describes the desperation inside that fort as supplies ran out. Ashanti oral history preserved the council meeting, the speech, the appointment, the command structure. This isn't legend dressed up as history. This is a documented war with a documented commander who happened to be a grandmother in her 60s. But the British Empire in 1900 had resources no single African kingdom could match on a battlefield. Rifles, artillery, reinforcements shipped in from other colonies across West Africa. By September, British troops had retaken Kumasi and broken the siege. Historical estimates put the toll at roughly 1,000 British and Allied African soldiers killed and around 2,000 Ashanti dead, though historians still debate the exact numbers on both sides. Yaa Asantewaa was captured and, like Prempeh before her, exiled to the Seychelles. She never returned to Ghana. She died there in 1921, more than 20 years after the war she led, having never once set foot on Ashanti soil again. So, Britain won, officially. It formally annexed Ashanti territory as a crown colony in 1902. But here's what actually happened underneath that official outcome. The British never got the Golden Stool. Even after capturing Kumasi, even after exiling Yaa Asantewaa, even after crushing the rebellion militarily and absorbing the territory outright, colonial officials never found it. Ashanti custodians had hidden it before the war ever started, moved it, buried it, protected it through absolute secrecy passed down through people who understood exactly what Hodgson had wanted to take and exactly what it would have meant for their nation to lose it. The stool that started a war was never captured. The soul of the nation, in the most literal Ashanti sense, survived the empire that tried to seize it. So why don't more people know this story? Why does a war that trapped a colonial governor inside his own fort for weeks, fought over the literal soul of a nation, barely register outside Ghana? Part of it is a pattern that we keep running into over and over in our episodes across different centuries and different kingdoms. Western history books, when they mention colonial resistance at all, tend to file it under native uprising, suppressed. One flat administrative sentence that erases everything specific about who led it, why, and what it actually cost the empire to win. And when the leader is a woman commanding an army, the erasure gets a second layer stacked on top of the first. Colonial writers of the era genuinely struggled to process what they were looking at. A 60-year-old woman, a queen mother, a title they translated loosely and understood poorly, directing a 6-month siege against the British military. It didn't fit their categories, so it got minimized, footnoted, reduced to a colorful anecdote about a fierce native woman rather than recorded as what it actually was, a formal military command held by a formally recognized political authority, exercising powers her office had always carried. There's something deeper going on too, and it's worth sitting with. Recognizing Yaa Asantewaa's full authority means recognizing that Ashanti society had already built a working structure for female political power, generations before European suffrage movements even began arguing for the vote. That's not a comfortable admission for a colonial narrative that justified conquest partly on the premise of bringing civilization to Africa. It's much easier to remember her as an exceptional warrior woman, a strange anomaly who broke the rules, than to admit the rules themselves had already made room for exactly what she did. What was the cost of losing that fuller story? It's the same cost every time one of these histories gets flattened down to a footnote. A precedent gets buried. Proof gets buried. Proof that an entire political system could formally place a woman in supreme military command, not as a desperate emergency exception when all the men had failed, but as an option the culture had already built into its own structure, ready to be used the moment it was needed. Proof that a woman in power wasn't a modern negotiation, a concession, a slow, grudging expansion of rights measured out over centuries. It was already there, structurally, sitting inside the title Ejisuhemaa in Ejisu in 1900, waiting for a moment that demanded it. So who was Yaa Asantewaa really? She was a queen mother who held real institutional authority long before the war ever started. Not granted to her by an emergency, but built into the office she already occupied. She was a political strategist who broke a deadlock among frightened, exhausted chiefs with a single, unanswerable question. She was a military commander who directed a siege sophisticated enough to trap a colonial governor for weeks and force a British retreat. She was a prisoner, exiled across an ocean, who never stopped being the reason an empire never got the one thing it actually came for. And she did every bit of this at 60 years old, in a position her own culture had already decided generations earlier that a woman could hold. She didn't inherit a war. She started one because the men around her hesitated and she decided the nation's soul wasn't up for negotiation. Why does this matter now? Because the same question keeps getting asked, generation after generation, in different countries, different languages, different centuries. Can a woman really hold supreme authority? Can a woman really command? And the honest answer, sitting right there in Ashanti history since long before 1900, is that the question was already settled. Yaa Asantewaa didn't have to prove women could lead armies. Her title already came with that authority built in, waiting. She simply had to decide, in a single room, on a single day, to use it. Reclaiming her story means something specific. It means teaching the actual structure of Ashanti governance, not just the folklore version of a lone warrior queen who came out of nowhere. It means understanding that the Golden Stool itself, still uncaptured, still sacred, still never sat upon by any human being to this day, is physical, ongoing proof that the war didn't end the way the British wanted it to, no matter what the treaty said. And it means recognizing that when history erases the systems that empowered women like Yaa Asantewaa, it isn't erasing an exception to the rule. It's erasing evidence that the exception was never the point. The system was. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe. New episodes drop every week. Stories about African women and men whose power shaped history. In the next episode, we head to the Benin Kingdom for the story of a queen mother who didn't just advise a king. She put on armor, marched beside her son into a war that he was expected to lose, and became the reason an entire kingdom had to invent a new royal title just to describe what she'd done.